when we were doing a research on JPN, we thought that there was so much more of a story to tell. From there, the entire narrative started of our journey of creating museums. So making these black boxes for these for the experiential centers is a very very specialized job. In India, we always feel the scarcity of public spaces, so that is where we always try to integrate public spaces into our buildings and all of our public projects.
Hello everyone. I present a warm welcome to everyone. Today we are here to celebrate the International Museum Day. So, distinguished guests, esteemed architects, and subscribers, a warm good afternoon to you all. I'm architect Simran Khare, co-editor at the Architect's Diary.
And I'm Shagun Shah, the co-editor at the Architect's Diary.
We extend a warm welcome to the celebration of International Museum Day. The Architect's Diary has become one of the most visited architecture websites in India and is committed to featuring the best of architecture and interior design projects. Established in 2016, we envisioned the Indian creative community in a digital space, which was then abundant and unexplored. Thanks to the 1 lakh plus architectural firms and designers who believed in us and chose us for their project publication. We now have a monthly digital footprint of 250 million plus on our effortfully built website and social media platforms, with more than 1 million plus visitors on our website monthly. We at the Architect's Diary go beyond project publishing, bringing to you the stories that matter through various digital platforms. Out of the many initiatives, TAD Originals is an initiative by the Architect's Diary and has been serving as a successful platform for industry experts to reach a wide audience. The channel is dedicated to the greatest minds and world changing thinkers in the architectural and design community. We admire and embrace the thoughts and ideologies that ignite some of the greatest minds. Their work and their design beliefs are defining global architectural and design language, and their more work is more towards the architectural landscape. Conducting this video series is helping us create a unique go to library for the design fraternity, where every question is answered. With this initiative, it's our vision to create a universal yet distinctive source of information beneficial for one and all.
I would like to give you a brief introduction about the Museum's Day. International Museum Day, a global celebration held annually on May 18th, aims to raise awareness about the pivot role museums play in cultural exchange, enriching cultures and fostering mutual understanding, cooperation, and peace among people.
Museums aren't merely repositories of our cultural and natural heritage. They are dynamic institutions that inspire learning, foster dialogue, and bring communities together. Yet, their significance transcends their collections. The architecture of these institutions profoundly influences how we engage with society and perceive the world. Public architecture, including museums and other civic buildings, serves as a cornerstone of our communities, shaping human interactions and reflecting our collective values.
As time progresses and technology advances, the scope of public architecture expands beyond mere gathering spaces. Public spaces breathe life into our cities through meticulous planning, attention to detail, and various other factors. To commemorate this momentous occasion, we are honored to have with us architect Harsh Chauhan, the Associate Director at Archohm. Archomm is an architecture firm with a multidisciplinary focus, offering expertise in envisioning, designing, executing, and documenting projects of all scales and typologies across sectors. Archomm endeavor to explore directions in contemporary Indian architecture while producing contextual and climatically responsive designs.
With notable projects such as the design of metro stations in Mumbai, the redevelopment of Tajganj, the JPN International Center, which is also known as the Museum of Socialism in Lucknow, Delhi Heart in New Delhi, and many others, Arcom has left an indelible mark on the urban landscape, enriching communities and shaping skylines with visionary design.
On behalf of the entire team at the Architect's Diary, we extend a warm welcome to Architect Harsh Chauhan. A glance at the flow of events for today, we will commence with an insightful presentation by Harsh, followed by a Q&A session. During the whole event, if anyone has any questions, kindly drop the questions in the chat box.
We can start with the presentation, Harsh. We give you the screen.
Thank you, Shagun. Thank you, Simran, for the lovely introduction. So today I'll be taking everybody through my journey, special journey through the Jayaprakash Narayan Social Museum. And, there's also a bit of a sneak peek of how we design museums and the process. So I will just quickly indulge into that. Yeah. So JPN Museum, Jayaprakash Narayan, as we call it, this Museum of Socialism. So there's a funny story that when we started this project, it is a small part within the very big convention center, which is called the JPN Convention Center. And within that, first, this was supposed to be like a gateway to the main building. And when we were doing a research on JPN, we thought that there was so much more of a story to tell. That's when we converted that into a museum. Obviously it took a lot convincing the client, but then from there, the entire narrative started of our journey of creating museums. So the entire building, it is this one wedge shaped building. The entire shape of the building comes from the three main ideologies of JPN, which are equality, freedom, and brotherhood. So this entire museum is divided into 4 blocks, 4 floors. So there's an entire basement which houses the 60% of the museum, and people generally enter from the ground floor. There's this one really nice, double height, triple height spaces. So we also created this entire museum as a conversation with its context. So as you can see that there's this Ambedkar Museum, Ambedkar Park, which is like a barren land. And then we wanted to create the conversation about the green. So that's why we created this museum. It's in a way form, it was like this one triangle which was missing from the main block, and it houses now the Museum of Socialism. The entire museum, as we understand, museums really need to be like a, if you ask any experienced designer, they would say they need a black box. They don't need any light. They don't need any external elements to it. That is why the architecture becomes a challenge for us architects, that how do you follow the principles of architecture. We have always been taught about the volumes, the scales, how light and ventilation is very critical. So making these black boxes for these for the experiential centers is a very very specialized job. So an entire building from the outside, it would be as blank as it gets, but there is ample amount of natural light which comes in through. We are always seeking through these windows on the side. Everything is hidden. So in all, that's the entire block. So from the outside it looks like this wedge, but the entire area is divided into these zones. And there's one with a self-realization zone, there's a reflection zone, interpretation, and then there's a very large restaurant on top. So that's how the entire form was taken. The entire basement, as I said, is almost 60% of the museum. Uh, I was working with the experiential design team back then. So I have been at site, and we have looked at how, this was our first take on museums. This was almost 8 years back. So we were also trying to figure out how museums can be created in our country. And back then it was a, stream which was not tapped upon. So in our entire experience, we first, we experienced a lot of museums outside India, and then sort of created our entire take on the museum. So it has a lot of experiential stuff. So there are these kinetic sculptures all across. You see this one kinetic sculpture which was dropping on the entire 3 qualities. So these 3 hands, they would move together but would never collide. So that's one of the entrances. And there are always cafes where people can sit as buffer spaces. If you go on the first floor, there these all these people's revolution. There was this one photograph gallery by very famous photographer. Then on the second floor is where the reflection zone is. So there is a bit of self-reflection. So the entire museum experience now is being accumulated into one of what people have actually gathered, what people have understood, and then they can self-reflect upon. So, there are these all crazy installations which have been created for the museum. And on top, everybody, all the visitors, they exit onto the terrace where you see this one sculpture of JPN, and this entire rooftop is has been created like a public space. So in India, we always feel the scarcity of public spaces. So that is where we always try to integrate public spaces into our buildings on all of our public projects. So the entire terrace is like this massive amphitheater where people can chill, people of Lucknow can come, this is all without ticket, so that's a plus point. And in the evenings, there's this one massive screen where there's projection which happens on top. So now I will just explain the entire process of museum design, of what we understand museums are. So initially, one could say that my own definition of museums was an archival museum where you would have paintings, art, sculptures, artifacts being showcased. But now with this new age, the immersive museums have started to come up all around, and they are more because of digital technology heavy and more informative. That is the new era of museums. So it is now we can say it's not just the architecture, but the very important narrative is experiential design. So architecture, this is one of the views of Agra Museum, which is the museum all about the Mughal architecture. So one can see the influences of Mughals, how the cleanliness, how geometrical shapes are being taken from. So the entire narrative should not be of copying the past. So that is where our entire take was while we were designing this project, and we did collaboration with David Spiffield architects. So this entire rhythm of columns and using the materiality of marble and concrete was there. JPN Museum, I just explained the entire trajectory of the museum, how we created this. Then now we have been creating all these science centers all around, all across India. So there's this one image of the Delhi Science Museum that we are creating in the heart of Delhi, near Nehru Place. And now we are doing almost 4 or 5 museums in Gujarat. Gujarat has been coming up with all these museums. So this is one regional science center which is in Jamnagar. So as I said, architecture is not just for the museums. There's also this experience design, and architects and everybody should understand that how experiential learning can benefit to the viewers. So our entire visitor journey, this is sort of our formula that we have created. That because these immersive museums, you need to engage people by entertaining them, but you need to subconsciously inform them and then eventually inspire them, and then give them spaces where they can reflect mindfully. So our entire spatial approach is through immersive, static, and interactive spaces. So you are being bombarded with all these informations all about the past, about somebody. So there is this one need of a breather space. So that is where architecture comes into place. That it is not just about how information can be transferred to the individuals who are visiting, but also how to create an experience, architecture experience for the people. So that is where all this translates to. So now just going to the process, I will just like detail out the entire process. So it first starts by understanding the brief. And I've just put in some images of what recently I've seen in the past museums, which, so this is Lausanne Museum of Art in Copenhagen. Then you need to understand the context. And the context is not just the immediate context, it is the micro and the macro context. So from there, you can take clues of architecture, and that is how one should take a stance of creating architecture for the future. This is another museum, Kunsthaus Museum of Fine Arts, Bregenz. This was built by Peter Zumthor, and it is one of the marvels. You don't see any light fixtures from the outside. It's a complete box, but it's an experience in itself. Then you need to do case studies. You need to do national, international case studies. And we at Arcom usually indulge ourselves into our desktop research, but also we like to travel and see what is being done in the world. So there's another example of Chichu Art Museum. I've personally been there. This was the first time I was in Japan, and it is an experience in itself. In-depth research is very much, how not just the experience, but in-depth research about the topic, about the theme of the museum. Okay, you can take out these clues for your architecture, and that usually is what is mistaken. Then the intent. What is the intent of the client? What is the intent of the community? What is the intent of the architect? So that should be portrayed. Identifying the stakeholders, so every public building has multiple stakeholders. So one should, take a note on who is there, how it is going to benefit to the community, and that is where it should all go. uh, Vision. The programmatic vision needs to be clarified. Everybody should understand what is the main vision of the client, also the vision of the architect, of how the building is going to be portrayed by the public. Then always going beyond the brief, defining the unsaid, always going one step ahead of what has been asked for. I mean, in Arcom, there's a saying that the minimum that one should do is what the client has asked for. That is where it starts. And then, the space forming for curated experiences. So that is where it should all be created. So when I'm talking about space making, I will give you an example of last year I went to Germany, and one of the most moving experiences that I ever had in a museum is the Jewish Museum. This museum is in Berlin, and I would just take you through how architecture has just been built, because there are no slides of the experience design, but how architecture moves people. And these images on the left, you can see that there's this one single dot array of light, and the entire area, because it's a Jewish museum, it's about the suffering of people. So entire architecture with that volume, with that coldness of concrete, it gives you that creepiness, it gives you that un- uneasy feeling. So that's how the architecture has been translated, and it's a beautiful example of how museum experience can, the building can be used as a visitor experience. So this was my personal favorite. This is called the Garden of Exile. This entire area, it has these 49 columns, and the entire floor is crooked. Once you hear about the story of exile and how people and their sufferings and everything, so refugees, whenever they went to a new land, there was always this uneasiness you would not feel in the place. So that is how architecture in this space, it makes you feel that. So it is how architecture is translating that emotion through that space. So that's it. Thank you. I hope.
Yes, it was definitely a really good presentation. I mean, I like the way the museum that you have designed is definitely shattering the stereotypes that we see in India with the museums, like just the blank walls and just showing the art pieces. So it's really interactive, but it's not like overload of the immersive technology that, as you mentioned, it's not overloading the user. We have the good breakout spaces, breathing spaces for the public, and even the inculcation of public spaces into such museums is, I think, something which is really necessary for the Indian context as well. So I really liked your presentation. Thank you so much for this presentation.
Thank you, Shakul.